Hello.
Welcome, everyone, to the BYWD page for our interview with expat coach Deborah Dahab. Welcome, Deborah.
Hi, Deborah.
Hi. Great to
So nice
see you.
to have
Thank you for
you.
having me.
And for those of you tuning in, you're not wrong. We are starting a little bit earlier because in the magic of technology these days, Deborah is actually in Portugal and the time changes.
It
in
does change.
It's been so we had to start a little bit early. So if you're catching the recording, you can still catch up with Deborah and everything she has to say by watching right now, whenever you're watching. So welcome, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So as we told you, rather than starting out with a tell us about yourself question, we like to start with something we think is a little bit jazzier. So what turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Okay. So I thought a little bit about this, to to see what I do and how that affects on my life. So it was a good internal observation exercise, actually. Um, and I think that one thing that really turns me on is going to sound weird, but it's walking. Ever since, whenever I have a problem, an issue, a concern, I need to move. And by moving and by walking, and I think, looking at whatever's there, and it would like to say that it's nature, but not always it's nature, right? Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's buildings and concrete, but it doesn't matter actually where I walk. I just need to walk. And somehow that movement sparks ideas, sparks, unfocusing too much on what I'm thinking about. So you look at some other things. It's kind of like trying to reproduce that, that moment in the shower where you're like, oh, yes,
Yes, yes.
because you're relaxed and because you're not thinking about the issue. So
And there's a ton
that's
of brain
like,
science that supports what you're saying in terms of allowing that soft focus to allow your creativity to really just, I was going to say gesticulate, but I meant gestate.
yeah, and
Mystically.
somehow it happens. It's like, walking and really it's just movement. And it's not dancing, it's not jogging. Um, it's just taking a 15-minute walk. That's enough.
Nice. I love that.
That's great. You're inspiring me because we got a pandemic dog, and that dog, of course, I do a lot more walking because of it. But I also do a lot of like connecting with friends on those walks, like making phone calls and so forth. And while that's been great, and that does like align with my values of connection, I think sometimes I need to just like not maybe listen to a podcast and maybe not call a friend. Like you're inspiring me to like just walk the dog, like just walk the dog and be there
Yeah,
walking.
and you're, I think that, well, it's not for nothing that we say like sleep on a problem, right? And it's kind of like, well, walk on it now.
Absolutely. And I remember, I think it was Carlos Castaneda. He has a quote that was something like your memory is stored on the back of your calves. And,
Oh,
Oh,
and, and I was like, I don't know if he was being literal or just saying like, go take a walk. And,
yeah, yeah. Well, it works for me. And look, I'm a very yoga oriented. I've been practicing yoga for, I don't know, 30 years now. And I'm into meditation. But sometimes, well, there is also walking meditation. There are tons of types of meditation, right? But I don't necessarily meditate when I'm walking. I'm just looking at stuff and, uh, uh, taking my focus away from what's worrying me and concerning me. And by doing that, sometimes, the solution comes.
absolutely. Have you ever walked a labyrinth?
I have, but I must tell you, I get a little bit claustrophobic. Um,
Oh, okay.
I get like, like I start to get really, my daughter loves them. She's 7, and we went to like one of those mirror mazes. She loved it. And I was like freaking out.
Actually,
Like,
I
when are
would
we gonna get out of here?
Actually, I meant like a spiritual labyrinth which is
Oh,
like at Chartres Cathedral in France. That's got the most famous
yeah.
labyrinth, and they're not claustrophobic because they're only on the floor. It's just a
Okay.
path.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Oh, I have to try
follow?
that. I have to try that. I have
Yeah,
to
you
find
should
one
try it.
there. Yeah.
I loved
Okay.
labyrinths. So, tell us about you and your mission of your business and what you do.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned before, I am an expat coach, and that came from being an expat. um, I'm a third cultural kid, well, an adult third cultural kid at this point, because I've lived abroad pretty much all my life. The first time I moved, I was one. The last time I moved so far, I was 40. And I made a ton of mistakes going, during my moves. And when I moved the time before last time in 2001, which actually just after my MBA, I used to be in corporate, um, and I lived in Portugal, and I was miserable for 5 years. I cried every day. On paper, my life was perfect. I had a great job. I was a marketing manager for entertainment company. I worked with Disney. It was like, on paper, it was perfect, but I was miserable and I didn't know why. And ultimately, I tried for 5 years. Then I said, you know what? I'm going back to Brazil, which at the time was I considered my home country. Fast forward some years, I find myself back in Portugal to start a family. And with that very big failure on my back, weighing a ton. And this time, failure wasn't an option. So I said, okay, I have to make this work. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go back to school. I got my master's in intercultural psychology, and it blew my mind, to learn all of that. This is a thing, that there's actually research about it. There are tools to help you, deal with the anxiety, the excitement, the challenges of moving abroad. It's not all glitz and glamour like we like to think. And I got my coaching certification. And since 2016, when I wrapped all the studies up, I've been working to help people have what I wish I had, which is help with tools and understanding, the processes we go through when we move. And ultimately, my business sense came in to create actionable tools. It's not just the research, like the blah, blah, blah of academia, which is great and it's a foundation for everything. But okay, then what, right? So I joined the coaching with that, and I actually have tools to help people navigate through this. It doesn't make the challenges go away, but in my view and how I work with my life is, if you have a problem, it's only a problem as long as you don't know how to solve it. When you know how to solve it, it ceases to be a problem. Now you're on solution mode. So that's what I bring to the table, and has been my mission for about 7 years now.
And this is when we were talking about this, we think about moving, to a different country. But when you live in a country as big as the United States, like Natasha and I do, it's a totally different culture when you move to different parts of the state. I mean, we're both in
Absolutely.
California, which is like two or three countries culturally.
Absolutely.
That can be, yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Even small countries, like even Portugal we're in, there's a huge difference, in the way people carry themselves and lead their lives, and certain norms, and it's basically you're changing your environment, right? And there's a lot that goes with that. You don't even need to. Hell, sometimes you change neighborhoods. That makes a difference.
Right, 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 right.
This is fascinating, Deborah. I didn't even know that that was a master's degree that you could get. Cultural, you said psychology? That's
It's
just
called intercultural psychology. Yeah.
blowing my mind.
Yeah,
That's
it's
amazing.
it's a field inside social psychology. So I don't do therapy. I don't, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I am a social psychologist.
Wow, fascinating. I feel like there's a cultural shift just when I go visit my sister from LA to Portland.
Oh my
It's
God.
like it's like a whole different. I mean, it's wildly different there, right? Yeah. Hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, and so when you and I were speaking, you had paraphrased what you do really well because there's one side that you do and one side that you don't do in terms of helping people, right? So can you share that with our viewers?
Absolutely, sure. So, when people move abroad or not, the first thing that comes to their mind usually is logistics, packing, housing, schooling. How do I find school for the kids? If that's the case, where am I going to live and things like that. And I like to, and that's what I don't do, right? I don't do that. And that can be especially challenging if you're moving to another country, right? Because you need visas and so forth. What I do, and I compare that to like the walls and the ceiling in a house. You have to have that. You have to have, you have to have a house. You have to have education for your kids. You have to have the basics. But you can have that, and you can have walls and ceilings in your house that you build with struggle, and everything's hard and everything's difficult, and you don't like what you see, it's pale. Or you can do that with joy, knowing that you're going to build a wall. Yes, you're going to have to mix, like the concrete whatever, or put the bricks in, but how to do it. You have a blueprint of the steps to do that. That first comes the floor, and then comes the walls, and then comes the ceiling, and not the other way around. Um, and that's what I bring to the table. It's kind of like the soundtrack of your move. You can have a Jaws soundtrack, like da 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 da, da, like everything's hard,
Mm.
everything's difficult. No matter what you do, it's a struggle. Or you can have an easy listening bossa nova soundtrack. Like the okay,
Dun,
yeah, it's
dun, dun,
happening.
dun, dun, dun.
Okay, let's breathe and move. So that's kind of like what I bring to the table, with the mindset, with the emotional aspects, also with a lot of training, understanding what happens, and ultimately we don't know what we don't know, right? And that's what I bring to the table: knowledge, connection, and tools to help you create the best soundtrack. If you don't like bossa nova, fine, but whatever is good for you.
But with the mindset part, you also said something along the lines of people know why they move, but they don't always know the answer to the what now that I've
Yeah,
moved.
yeah, for sure. It's what I say is that the building block for your move is knowing your what for.
What for?
Because we know why we want to do things, right? And that kind of is what we call in the research the push factors, right? Things that are pushing you away from where you are.
Like traffic and lack of jobs and high cost
There
of
you go.
living, right?
Exactly. Things like that, or violence or whatever. Um, then once you do move, those things are gone. So if you don't know the purpose and what you moved for, it's really easy to fall into this limbo of void, because you no longer have what was bothering you. But if you're not clear on what you want to build, what you want to accomplish, it's so easy to fall into this trap of nothingness.
And I totally have a friend who has experienced that where they moved because of cost of living and the place they moved to, they didn't have a strong what for. And they're struggling.
Yeah.
And so when you said
Yeah.
that, it just made perfect sense to me.
Yeah. And this is true for everything. Really, I mean, if you're gonna go do something, it's important to know what you're doing it for, right?
Yeah, everything you're
The,
saying parallels a lot of what we do with the planet. So everything you're saying, I'm like, oh yeah, yep, double down on
exactly,
that.
exactly. And what I bring to, and what we do is similar in the way that I bring a strategic. Oh, I got tongue tied. Strategic mindset to the move. So, for example, um, how do you decide what to pack and what to leave behind? Are you gonna, like, how do you do that? Especially if you're moving to another country. Well, I show people, I have a methodology that at least gives them the jump start. Even if they decide not to do it, at least they're starting with something, which is, looking at your objects in terms of They can be emotional objects or they can be practical objects. And it's really important to have, when you're moving to another place, objects that ground you, that give you a sense of home, that gives you a sense of belonging, because you won't have that in the outside of your home, at least for a while. So, and these little things, so people say, I'm going to just sell everything and down, and they usually regret it at some point. And on the other opposite of it is like, I'm not going to sell anything. I'm just going to move everything. Well, then you're missing out on the opportunity of opening up space, literally and energetically, and figuratively, to create new things, new experiences. So, really, what are you moving for then if you want
Right.
copy paste of your life? So
Right.
that's the ultimate question. What are you moving for? And that underlines every single decision you make in your move.
Fascinating, fascinating. By the way, I see we have some viewers. You can comment or ask questions. Just comment on the Facebook post that you see, and we will be able to read it. So if you have a question for Deborah, feel free to throw it in there. So, Deborah, what one tip would you like to leave our viewers with if they are thinking about a move?
Well, I think it's know your what for. That's like that's the most important thing, because there will be challenges. I promise you that. There will be moments when you go like, "What the hell am I doing?" It's a huge investment emotionally, physically, financially, energetically, and share your what for with your other family members, because they might have other what fors, which is fine as long as they have one. So it's really good to have this conversation before you start feeling the challenges, and I can't communicate, and going into the cultural shock phase, because that it's harder then. It's harder to tap into your what for then, because everything seems a lot blurrier when you're in the cultural shock phase.
Well, I'm glad you brought up other family because I did have one question, which is, I'm at the age where I'm in that sandwich generation. I have a child, but I also have older parents that we help care for who live nearby. And how does one think about a shift like this when they have older parents or older relatives that they're taking care of? Either if the older parents do want to come or don't want to come. Do you have
Mhm.
any advice about
That's
that?
a great question, and that's something that well, I would say that today most of my clients are dealing with in one way or another. So there are many ways to go about this, right? In some situations, you will be leaving loved ones behind. So, they will be staying on and you will be moving, either because they don't want to go, or they can't because of health issues. The first thing I think is to really understand what you are dealing with. And by doing that is, first, and I'm sorry to repeat this, but knowing your what for, and it has to be strong enough to be able to counteract, to balance out the negative aspects of moving. And really plan, and then this has everything to do with you guys, because really plan what I call your connection plan. So tell the people that are staying in your home country, and when you do that, ask them, how do they want to keep in touch? Leave it to them. Do they want to Zoom? Do they want to WhatsApp? Do they want to write letters? How do they want to keep in touch? And have a very strategic plan, like how often are you going to talk to one another? How often are you going to communicate? What are the means are you going to communicate? If you have to, for example, hire someone to pass, to go to your parents' house, twice a week to check on them, or ask for a friend to do that if you can, just for a little bit of peace of mind. Or you can, and another aspect is to put in your budget when you're moving, trips that might happen on the spur of the moment, because things happen. So really include that in your budget when you move, because you might need to go back very quickly. Or you just want to go back, twice a year to see people, or have them come over for vacation or whatever. But think about this before you actually go, because it's a lot harder to do things from a distance.
That's great. That makes great sense. I love the idea, the planning ahead and budgeting for all those. It's yeah, those are maybe things people wouldn't necessarily consider in the overall picture because you said there's so much to consider, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So Deborah, where can people find out more about you? Do you have an offer you'd like to put out there? Tell our visitors, our listeners, our watchers, where they can find your services and what offers you've got going on right now.
Okay, so I have three tiers of offers, but I have a special offer for your viewers and your listeners. I work with self-study e-courses, things like how to prepare for your scouting trip, how to decide where to live, very short, straight to the point. I also have one-to-one sessions, so individual coaching. But what I wanted to offer to your viewers and your listeners who are preparing to move abroad is the opportunity to join the Master Your Move program. So this is a 6-month coaching program where you people get in touch, and we have live calls with the group of people who are also preparing to move abroad. There's 8 modules of tons of information. We talk about lots of things that I talked about here. There's a little guided meditation so you can tap into your what for, because that's easier said than done. Um, and a lot more. And it also includes 3 individual sessions with me. So during 6 months, you'll have all the support you need to really master the mindset of a move abroad. And your viewers can get 10% off, and
Ooh.
I will afterwards leave the link and the code that they should use if they want to take advantage of that. And I talk to every single person before they come in the group. So there's a little could chat with me to see if it's a good fit for the program. And once it is, well, then everyone's welcome to join. And for you viewers, there's an extra little something.
Good. So you'll
Fantastic.
just put it in the comments below, I guess, in
Yes,
Facebook.
yes, yeah.
Great. And you can visit Deborah at deborah.dahab.com. You can see that right there
Yeah,
below. And then also your Facebook group too.
exactly.
Yeah, fantastic. Wow, fascinating. I had no idea. This is like you're like a moving doula.
Well,
It
yeah,
is a rebirth of sorts. So,
I mean it's
it can
yeah.
be. It can be. It
Well,
can
so
be.
it's wildly different because when I moved to LA over 20 something years ago, I was in my early 20s. I had like, $2,000. I was like, I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know. I don't have a car. I'd like, but it was so many, it was, and I had a what for kind of, sort of, but I didn't, it's wildly different place in my life than I am right now. Right. So what you're talking about, my goodness, to even wrap my brain around an international move would be, you'd need somebody to really hold your hand and walk you through that. That's amazing that you offer that service.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I love what I do. I offer what I wish I had in the past, and I
Right.
didn't.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
the pain point that birthed this was obvious.
At least it was worth something.
Yeah, for
there
sure.
That's what, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. That's the whole I
Exactly.
believe that's the whole point.
Well, then
And
you always win.
yes, exactly. Then you always win. And by the way, even though you don't do the logistics, you can often help point people in the right direction, right? So,
Yes, for some countries, mostly Spain and Portugal, I can help with. Yeah, I do. I have partners. I have people that, yeah, I collaborate with, and I can point them in the right direction.
and I think you mentioned that you were developing more resources in Mexico, right,
Yes,
actively.
too. Yes, I do have also some collaborations going on in Mexico, so I can point people in the direction of dealing with the logistics and understanding the Mexican landscape, so to speak.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining
My
us.
pleasure. Thank you so much.
And look for that code, people. Bye, Wild Dreamers.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.